Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Live Limitless Summit, where we are focusing and discussing how to have conscious, abundant, and empowered relationships. I am Neepam Jain, and I love empowering and transforming people's limiting belief, pain, and trauma so that they can be the best version of themselves. Relationships form a very integral part of each one of our lives, and I believe they are all intertwined, whether it is your business, money, friends, family, or kids. And when you are a parent, it's all the more very important to understand parent child relationship in a conscious way so that you can have harmonious home, you can have an amazing communion with your kids. So today I have someone very special with us who is gonna share her knowledge, her wisdom with us today. So welcome to the show, Mary. I'm really excited to have you over here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Mary Devers Parish, she is a parent whisperer. She's an author of Empowered Parents, Empowering Kids, and she's known very well the struggles in raising today's children. Her out of the box strategies have been proven to be effective as parents around the world have applied them to become more of the parent they truly were meant to be, raising children that are free to soar and be themselves in today's world. So I'm really so excited to understand what is it, what is your out of box theory which you are spreading across the world, Mary. So would definitely like to dive deeper into your wisdom. Over to you. What's there
Okay.
for us?
Okay. Thank you. So yes, parent-child relationships are really key, and being a parent is one of the most awesome opportunities to be able to have self-growth and to develop a relationship not only with your child but with yourself through the eyes of your children. And so the topic that I picked to talk about today was about responsible parenting and how that can grow healthy parent child relationships. So, what do I mean by responsible parenting? This isn't about taking responsibility. This is about using the word response as how we respond to our children and our ability to respond to them in a way that empowers both the parent and the child and grows those relationships even deeper.
Love. I so like that. It's responsibilities. Just the word response, and how often we don't even do that. We are not responding to them the way we should respond, right?
Right, right. Or we take on the whole idea of responsibility as everything that our child does is our responsibility. And when we do that, we actually disempower our child from being able to know what they need to be accountable for, what they're capable of doing, um, all of that. And so a parent can actually get caught up in taking away the power of a child by thinking that they're responsible for everything. So when we switch over to a different way of responding to our children's choices, their actions, their struggles, even, we can empower them to become more confident, to learn how to maneuver through different issues, through ways of questioning, through allowing them to process and recognize their choices and to not fall into the blame or shame game or even the fear game of the things that they've done. How many out there can remember doing something that you weren't supposed to and feeling either fearful or shame instead of being able to process through those and using them as experiences that teach you about yourself and about possibilities and about maybe what's going on that's causing me to make these choices. And so when we can respond as parents in a different way to our children, and we take away that responsibility aspect, then we actually connect to our children in a deeper way. So let me give some examples of how that works. Like, how does a parent do that, right? So, so often parents need to just stop. Like, we need to give ourselves permission to stop and not to feel like we've got to jump in with everything. So I want parents right now to just kind of, when was the last time your child did something that you really reacted to? And so just, pull up that experience and just what do you remember about that? Do you remember that maybe you yelled, maybe judged them, maybe, did you make them feel bad for what they chose? Or did you, were you able to create a space for them to learn about what their choice had been? And
It's
this isn't about trying to make yourself wrong. This also gives you clues about your childhood and how you were raised and what you have taken on as the belief of what it means to be a good parent
true.
based on what you grew up with, what you see modeled out there. And yet, is that always the best response for your child?
Yeah, true.
So, being able to be in this space and to acknowledge your children from a place that doesn't judge them. So when they have make a choice and it's not something that you necessarily agree with, rather than jumping in with your agenda, with your lecture, with your judgment or your scolding or, and we come from that place because we think that's the best thing to do, right? But think back to what that felt like when that was done to you. What feelings, what burden did that put on you? That feeling of wrongness, that feeling of shame, that feeling of, oh, I'm less than, like, you just can remember shrinking. And I know that in our hearts, that's not what we want to do for our kids.
Want to do that.
And so when we can ask them questions or we can become curious about their choices and we can help acknowledge that, oh, this is what was done. Okay, so where do we go from here? What other choices were there? How can I come from this from a place that really truly encompasses my child in a space that's safe and not one that's going to make them feel less than themselves? And imagine what your life would have been like if that's how your parents would have responded to you. But because many parents respond out of this place of making their children feel less than, they do that from that old idea of I'm responsible for you. And so when you make the bad choice or the wrong choice, then that's a reflection of me. And so I need to fix that and I need to make sure that you're not going to do that again. And we need to become aware of that,
And this is
that that's not.
such an unconscious pattern which just flows out. I mean, you realize after you have just done that, once you have maybe whatever you have done, either you have shouted or you have judged your child, but we as parent, we feel guilty after doing that.
We do because we know how it feels because we've felt that too. But yet we don't know what else to do.
Yes.
What that's what we were raised with. That's what we see other people doing or we're so frustrated, because we haven't taken the time to stop, ask some questions. Like what I find is when I stop and I just allow myself to just ask some questions like, well, what do I know about this? How would I like to be responded to? What would really be the kind thing to do here for my child? And I can remember my children growing up and doing, kind of the same stupid things, getting in trouble, and as I look back on my old reactions, of, oh my gosh, like, because that's makes me look bad, to a place of new consciousness to where I said, that must be really hard. I wonder what you're feeling about that right now. I can bet that. And I remember when my son told me after he had gotten in trouble, I don't know, the second or third time, and he said, I just was so ashamed to tell you about it. And it just broke my heart because it was like, I never want you to feel ashamed to tell me anything because I love you no matter what. And together we can figure this out. And I'll be there for whatever you need. But I know that you can also move through this yourself. I know that you can figure this out. And I'm not disappointed in you at all because I know that you're going to grow from this experience, which didn't leave him feeling shame and didn't make him feel shame. It bolstered him up to be able, okay, we can do this. I don't feel alone. I don't feel so bad, because how many times do we all mess up, right? Yeah.
And
And so
this
being able
incident,
to do that,
I think this incident would have left your child so much empowered, and I'm sure he must have figured it out himself.
he did. And I got to watch him do that. And, just um, the self growth that he had to go through to be able to meet the consequences of his actions, and yet uh, know that at least his mom isn't, judging him about it, and it made him feel better about himself. And I could really be proud of that for him, that he could step into that. And so oftentimes parents will do everything in their power to have their children avoid these types of circumstances, right? Like we will hover, we will, keep them, as safe as we possibly can. And while we have no control over that, there's also a place where we have to be willing to let them go. That our response has to be, I trust you not to do what I think you should do, not to do everything right, but I trust you to figure out that if something goes wrong, we'll work it out.
Yes.
And trust is a whole different way of looking at it with our children. We want to say, I trust you to not sneak out at night, or I trust you to not lie to me. I trust, and you're breaking your trust with me. But, we can really trust people to do what's going to feel best for them. And so if a child lies to you about something, then you can trust that they're going to do that because they don't feel safe telling you. They're really afraid. Even if you say, you're not in trouble, you can tell me everything, there's still this element of fear. And when we can acknowledge that and say, I can remember feeling fearful when I did something wrong and I didn't want to tell my parents. And that's really a tough area to be. And just acknowledge it and allow them then to come through it in their time and in their way. So this response ability, this able to respond to your children in a whole different way takes a lot of practice. And the first place that it starts is with ourselves, because how we respond to our own self is an indication of how we're going to respond to others. So if you're always judgmental to yourself, what if you stopped that? And what if you treated yourself with the same kindness that you want to give to your children and give to others? And this is really key because I think to really become an empowered parent that empowers your children to be who they are, you need to model it because they get mixed messages. And you want kids to be able to respond back to you. So it's also their ability to respond to you, but they respond to you based on what they see you being and doing to yourself. And so if you are always judging yourself and making yourself wrong for the choices that you made and giving yourself that self talk that you would have gotten maybe from your parents, and they see that, it's hard for them to respect you. And they don't get the confidence that you feel about being yourself. And I can remember one of my children having that sense of confidence from a very early age. And I remember watching him and thinking, wow, I wish I could be like that. I wish I could have that confidence. And so he inspired me to be able to respond to myself in different ways. So he actually became my teacher as I watched him move through being able to do things and not worry about what other people thought, not caring about, just being able to be that free spirit. And while that didn't always work for him, um, in a lot of ways, it did allow him to just become the person and to be who he wants to be without being encumbered by having to meet other people's expectations.
So, Mary, I have a question out here. So when we are being that, when we are allowing them to be there, explore their life, and not interfering and responding in a very, very different way, but there is a fear. As parents, this fear always creeps in. What if my child fails? What if that step which she's taking is not a right step? How do you deal? I mean, being a parent, I mean, okay, it's you just let it go. I mean, saying is easy, but when you're actually being that, when you're actually doing that, it's a tough thing, because you
Yes.
as a parent, watching your child fall, watching your child fail, and making wrong choices in life, how to be at that time, and what do you suggest parents to be at that time?
Yes. So I want the first thing we have to do is we have to do a mindset shift. So we have to look at failure as not failure. And your fear of failure is more about you than it is really about your child. It's the belief of what you took on about what it means to not meet a goal or to not finish something or to do it wrong. That's all based on your beliefs. But what if failure doesn't exist? What if every experience that we go through, that our children go through, are just experiences? And with those experiences comes the opportunity to grow in awareness and consciousness as we ask questions about what that was about. What did I need? What did I learn from that? How would I do that differently? See, and when we aren't afraid of failure, then we set our kids free to try and do their own experiences to learn from their own experiences. I would bet the majority of parents out there, we all learned from our own mistakes. I've got plenty. I've got plenty that I can, that it's like, but I have learned so much through those. And why would I rob my children of those experiences? And so I have to look at what is my role here. It's not to protect them from these experiences, it's to be there to guide them, to love them, to go through the processing with them, to let them know that regardless of the choices that you make, there's always the opportunity for something greater. But we've got to shift into that. And so if you're finding that you're afraid of something, of seeing your child fail, you need to ask yourself what that's really about. Is that your younger self feeling this fear of failure because what happened when you failed?
Yes.
And much of that is projected, and not most of it doesn't even ever really come true. And watching I've watched my kids do things that every parent like wants to stay away from, and yet I've had to, we're not in control anyway. We're really not. And so what would be better to project all this fear around our kids of what it means to fail, or to empower them to find confidence through the experiences that they have, to believe in them. And what would you prefer if the role was reversed? What would you want?
I got it. It's actually very deep and intense.
Yeah. I don't know where, uh, it's never been proven that um, punishing our kids or judging our kids or um, making them feel bad about about themselves for the choices they made has ever made their life better. It's not a way to motivate your kids. Motivating them out of fear or out of shame does not allow them to grow up and be confident. It pushes them into a place where they either have to prove themselves all the time, that they're always defending themselves, or they fall into this place of feeling like they're always less than. And I know that parents don't want that. And it's not our intention to do that. We don't do that on purpose. But this is the time where we wake up, we become more aware of who we are, and that we have other choices now, that we do not have to follow the old traditional way of parenting. And this isn't about making our parents wrong or anything like that. They all did the best they could. And we've been doing the best we can. But that doesn't mean that we can't improve. So I get really excited when parents can start to look at parenting from this whole different shift of being a lot more conscious and aware of what's going on for them, what's coming up for me as far as fear or around failure, or or where I feel like I have to be responsible because it reflects on me. How can I begin to change that and see that from a different perspective? So recognizing that your children are individuals. They're not carbon copies of you. They are their own, they're here for their own journey. And they need you to be there to coach them along, to support them, to, be there like a coach would be there, right? Cheering them on, even when they fall down. When a little toddler falls down, a parent doesn't go, oh my God, they failed, right? At that age, we say, get up and go again. So why wouldn't we do it as they get older? Where does that change, right? And really begin to look at that as, is that's more about me than it really is about them.
And how much it holds true that all your relations, whether it is your with kids or with anyone else, is a mirror, is a reflection of your inner self.
Absolutely. I think though with children, because they mirror us so much, and you have such a close relationship, that the parts of you that they take on that you really don't like are going to be the parts you really need to look at, because they're just being that mirror right there for you.
And we often
Uh,
push it under the carpet or just don't want to face those. I mean, we wear masks and just make up ourselves.
right. Instead of really looking at it as, wow, here's an opportunity for me to change that and to do something different. And um, it's just such a wonderful experience and opportunity for parents to be able to do that. And I don't think many parents see it. They see it as, that's the hard part. That's the part where I don't get along with my child. Well, that's because you're so much alike, you know, that how can you begin to see these in a different light not as a rightness or a wrongness, but what's working, what's not working. Those are my favorite questions too, for parents to ask, what part of this is working and what's not working, because you have the power to continue with what's working and you have the power to change what's not working. But you have to be willing to look at it and face it, and that does take courage. It takes courage, but it not it's a lot easier if you come from it from the place of there's nothing wrong with me, but there are some things that I can do differently,
Yes.
because that's not really working for me.
Hmm, how true.
Yeah.
Before we wind up, Maddie, do you have few tools like, gold, just few tips, one or two, which you would like to share so that they can just take it away and implement it in their life?
So I have a 3-step process that parents can use, and I call them the ABCs. And the first step is when you're relating to a child, and this can be yourself or anybody actually. The first is acknowledgement, like acknowledging what is, but taking the judgment out. It's not about compliments or praise or any of that. It's about, acknowledging what is. You tied your shoes today. I got to work late. Just simple acknowledgments, but then asking questions and being curious. That's the next one. Be curious about things. Well, what was that about? How would I like to do that differently? How did that work for you? But all from a place of curiosity, not from an agenda place, not from a judgment place, but just curious. Tell me more about that. When you look your child in the eyes and you say, how did that feel? Tell me more about that. What do you think about that? You have made a connection that they feel loved, they feel cared for. You have focused attention and you care about what they have. And then the C part, so we have A is acknowledgement, B is be curious, and C is what choice would I like to make now? Is there a different choice I need to make? Maybe it means I just be quiet, and just being in that space, but knowing you always have choice. And so when you can remember acknowledgement and being curious and recognizing the choices that you have, those 3 tools can really help change your mindset, put you in a place of being curious and asking questions, questions that open people up, not close them down, right? So they're just that place like, I just want to know more. And if you don't feel like it, that's okay, but I'm just curious. And you have this open space about you, so that whole energy changes too when you take off all the judgment, all the fear, all the expectations, and you just show up, just here I am.
Thank you so much. It was actually an eye opener for me, and I'm sure for our viewers too, even. So, Maddie is providing a freebie which you all can avail by clicking at the link below. And where, if people want to reach to you, how they can reach to you, Mary?
Very simply, my website is BU Parenting, BEYOU Parenting.com. You can also find me on Facebook through BU Parenting or through Mary Dravis Parish. And you can always send me a Facebook message. Um, if you're looking for more resources, I have my book, Empowered Parents, Empowering Kids, which is a guide to BU parenting. And on those free gifts, um, there's 2 of them. One is the first 3 chapters of my book. There's a free audio, so you can get a flavor for what kind of resource that is. And also, there's an empowerment survey. So there's, I think, 14 questions that are asked to see how empowered of a parent are you. And you just answer those, and then after you submit the survey, then you get the answers back about your areas of maybe need some improvement with some ideas about how you can begin to change some of that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being over here and sharing your golden nuggets with me and my viewers out here. Thank you, viewers, for hanging out with us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and love yourself a little more and live limitless.
Yay.
Bye. See you all soon.